Secretary Yellen and Chair Powell, thank you for joining us today. And as I expressed to you earlier, Chair Powell, I want to congratulate you again on your renomination for another term leading the Federal Reserve Board, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Chair Powell, you responded that our best expectation, this is your quote, our best expectation is there will be modest upward pressure on prices this year, but they won't be particularly large or persistent in the future. Chair Powell, since that hearing 8 months ago, I have asked you about higher inflation, and yes, to my good friend, the gentleman from Colorado, we're going to talk about inflation. That's all that people are talking about in my district, Missouri's 2nd Congressional District. They want to know why these prices keep going higher and higher and higher and higher. And no, I don't believe it's necessarily to fall at the foot of the Fed blame. It is Democrat policies and overspending. But I digress. I asked you about higher inflation 2 more times, sir. And Americans have experienced surging increases in, as I said, food, fuel, housing, leading up to the most expensive Thanksgiving, Christmas, and holiday season on record. Is it your view, sir, that these price increases still aren't, quote, particularly large or persistent?
No, that is no longer my view.
Thank you for that answer. Chair Powell, yesterday in the Senate Banking Committee, you stated that you believe it's time to retire the word transitory. I couldn't agree more. And to explain more clearly what the Fed means when referring to transitory inflation. I think most Americans, sir, define transitory as temporary, but the strain on their monthly budgets and paychecks from this inflation does not seem transitory or temporary. If that's not what you mean, then could you explain the Fed's meaning, please?
Sure. So the word transitory, to some, as you suggest, has a sense of short-lived, a matter of months kind of thing. Whereas when we're using it in a specific way to say that transitory to us means that this episode, however lengthy it is, will not leave a persistent, long-run string of high inflation behind it. And the problem, our whole role that we play, it really revolves around having clear communication. When you have a word that means different things to different people, we just need to move on and find a better way to explain ourselves. And most forecasters still do think, overwhelmingly believe that inflation will come down significantly in the second half of next year. But as I've said, the risks of higher inflation have moved up. Higher, more persistent inflation. Is
soaring debt and deficits and excessive spending and dumping stimulus spending after stimulus spending after stimulus spending into our economy, will that be a driver of inflation?
So I guess I would say, I don't want to comment on fiscal policy directly.
I'm just saying in general.
In general, so if you go back to last March, the median of the blue chip, the best resourced forecasters thought that inflation would be right about at our target, March of this year. What was wrong with that analysis was really that we understood demand would be strong. We didn't understand how the significant problems of the supply side, which are very hard, they were unique. We haven't
and how
seen
much money there would be in households and in the
demand is very, very strong, both from no question, from fiscal policy and also from the quickly rebounding economy. The economy is very strong now.
I agree. So, Secretary Yellen, let me ask you, the CBO, and they reflect one of the more conservative scores, has said that Biden's spending bill, the most recent one, will add $367 billion to the deficit. Could you describe the long-term consequences of too much fiscal spending on financial markets and the price of consumer goods?
So let me first put the CBO number that you mentioned in perspective. They did score Build Back Better as resulting in $367 billion in deficits over 10 years, not in a year, but over 10 years.
Well, there were a lot of gimmicks that went through to
However-
get that number, too.
However,
Let's be honest.
the score, that score, they made clear, does not include the revenue that will come from enhancement of resources for tax enforcement. It doesn't include that.
How does
And
this
Treasury-
overspending
Treasury-
on our financial markets
Gentlewoman's time has
deal with the
expired.
price of consumer goods? I'd like the
Gentlewoman's-
gentlelady to
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas,